So first, I want to thank the Religious Communication Association and the Vice President's panel for allowing me to be able to be accommodated by sending this to you all by video for the panel of the many voices of Black feminism, womanist, hood, ratchet, Africana, etc., communicating for greater cultural regard in religious and other spaces. I am Dr. Kami Anderson, and I am one of the panelists for this panel, and I was unable to be in New Orleans for you all, so I wanted to at least be able to share some thoughts with you all in terms of where I am when it comes to the many voices of Black feminism. And my topic actually goes into some research that I'm already doing that is trying to link some of the African spiritual traditions to the world language classroom. So I am going to share a little bit of that research with you all in order to be able to just give you just a glimpse as to what it is that I'm doing. So what brought this about is that in my musings from the sacred space that is within my head, I often imagine various groupings of co-teachers in dream classrooms. Like, for example, dream teams that encompass my academic persona, like the imagining of a multicultural education class taught by Dr. Anna Julia Cooper and Zora Neale Hurston and Catherine Dunham, or dreaming of an international communication course that's led by the brain of Marcus Garvey and Leopold Senghor and Chimamanda Adichie. Or as of late, though, the classroom that I've been daydreaming about has been the world language classroom, and what it would look like to have a world language class that uses the lens of Malidoma Somé, Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon, and Octavia Butler. Yes, this is an interesting mix for sure, I'm sure. But what would it look like to construct an Afrocentric pedagogy that centers on African spiritual ritual traditions, womanist theological traditions, and the world-building complexity brought to us by Afrofuturism? So this particular contribution to this panel seeks to explore the tenets by looking specifically at aspects of Dogon cosmology, the womanist pedagogy, and the means of constructing a beloved language community that empowers and sustains Black children by using language for future envisioning. So this is a very large undertaking, and I'm sure of that. But I'm just going to give you a bite-sized piece of it and ask that you bear with me as I pontificate through all of my languages, the Spanish, the French, the hip-hop, and the Mama Speak, because all of them are important to the ways in which I've kind of matured in this particular academic identity. This is kind of spawned from the notion of the Andarcan feminist epistemology, that theoretical framework that emerges from the intersection of Black feminist thought, critical race theory, and African diasporic traditions. This epistemology centers on the lived experiences, the knowledge systems, and cultural practices of Black women and other marginalized groups, particularly within the context of oppression and resistance. So this term was popularized by Dr. Diane Stewart and others who have contributed to the development of this particular perspective. So I'm using that as my lens as I'm going through this discussion. The use of theologic doctrine as a means of providing holistic approaches to address key societal ills is not necessarily a new concept. We have Catholic social teaching, right? That doctrine from the Catholic Church that addresses the social, economic, and political issues from a moral and ethical perspective, grounded in the teachings of Jesus Christ. And the origins of CFT can be traced back to the late 19th century, and its roots can actually be found in the early Christian community and throughout church history. I am not introducing Catholic social teaching as a means of centering the Catholic Church, but really to justify radical interpretations of spirituality that needs to have some evidentiary support rooted in Western theology and religion in order to establish it within mainstream and not be relegated to the realms of metaphysical banter amongst the third eye woo-woo spiritualists, okay? So when I'm talking about this idea of connecting Dogon cosmology, Afrofuturism, and womanist pedagogy into world language learning, I'm looking about creating a multidimensional educational experience that fosters cultural awareness, critical thinking, and a profound connection to the material. So these frameworks are rooted in African diasporic knowledge systems and imaginative futures, and provides a rich perspective that enhances language learning while grounding it in cultural and social contexts. So I'm looking at Dogon cosmology specifically. I'm looking at the three cosmological concepts that come within Dogon cosmology. I'm looking at Beneso, Giriso, and Sodai. And they provide the framework for understanding and teaching rooted in African epistemological traditions. So when I'm thinking about the Dogon people of Mali and how they use these different concepts, I'm going to break that down for you just a little bit. So Beniso is the word at face value, right? So it represents the surface level of speech or the literal meaning of words. That's what we're doing in a language class. We're teaching the literal meaning of words. It aligns with the initial stage of knowledge acquisition, where learners are focused on basic facts, vocabulary, and direct communication, which is most language classes. Then we have the Giriso, which is the word beyond or beneath the surface. And with Giriso, we're looking at the deeper hidden meanings that require interpretation and a more nuanced understanding. So it moves beyond the literal to explore the implicit and symbolic aspects of knowledge. So it looks at the context, the symbolism, the interconnectedness that comes with the learning. So where you're able to introduce those things like the Black Spanishes or the Black Englishes or the Black French languages that are a part of speaking in terms, Giriso falls under that would fall under the Giriso concept. But then you go beyond that to Sodai. And Sodai is a word that cannot be spoken. And when we're talking about Sodai, we're encompassing the more profound and ineffable aspects of knowledge, the truths and understandings that transcend verbal expression. So the ways in which, as a Black people, we use certain tonalities within the Black church, or the ways in which we use certain paralanguage when we are amongst family and friends, the code switching, the code meshing, all of that stuff would come into Sodai. And this level resonates with Afrocentric emphasis on the holistic embodied learning and the importance of ancestral and spiritual knowledge. So it's being able to essentially center spirit in the midst of the world language classroom. And then when you bring in the layer of Afrofuturism to that, you're now talking about how to use innovation, creativity, and imagining a language future. What does a new Black language future look like using the Afrofuturistic lens? And of course, womanist pedagogy, me being identifying as a womanist scholar and a womanist teacher, being able to show how we bring in that inclusivity, how we center experiences, and how we make sure that we are creating systems that prioritize social justice, community, and holistic understanding. So being able to bring all of those things together into the world language classroom. And when you look at this with that lens of undarkened feminist epistemology, you are looking at the ways in which we can resist some Eurocentric knowledge hierarchies that by valuing African cosmologies and speculative imagination and the lived experiences of marginalized communities. So how do we bring that knowledge into the world language classroom? It's rooted in a Black woman's way of knowing, emphasizing the interconnectedness of knowledge, culture, and identity. So when we integrate all of these frameworks together, world language learning becomes a transformative process that affirms cultural heritage, centers diverse narratives, and cultivates global citizenship. Through these approaches, educators empower students to see language not just as a tool of communication, but as a medium for cultural preservation, innovation, and liberation. By taking this integration of Dogon cosmology, Afrofuturism, and womanist pedagogy into world language learning, it not only enriches the educational experience, but it also disrupts the traditional, the Eurocentric, and those other more mainstream approaches to knowledge acquisition. This approach fosters a deeper cultural connection, empowering learners to engage in the language as a tool for understanding and preserving diverse worldviews. By grounding language instruction in the symbolic richness of the Dogon traditions, the creative potential for Afrofuturism, and the inclusivity of womanist pedagogy, educators create a space where cultural sustainability and social justice are at the forefront. Ultimately, this transformative practice uplifts marginalized voices, it encourages critical inquiry, and it prepares students to navigate and contribute to an increasingly interconnected world. Through this lens, language becomes not only a means of communication, but also a pathway to collective empowerment and cultural reclamation. Being able to center the African spiritualist traditions with the marriage of Afrocentric pedagogy and womanist pedagogy, we're able to redefine and reshape the language learning process for marginalized groups, in particular Black children in the world language classroom. Thank you so much.